Hello everyone, this is Tyler Whitney, the narrative director over here at Seismic Squirrel, and today we're diving into the weeds on how we approach player choice in Aether Iron.
When we set out to make this story, at first it was just me. I was tasked with writing an RPG, something that felt immensely daunting at the time. We went through several iterations, some really leaned into the steampunk. We had a mechanical dragon at one point, and some really into the gangster element, where you were making an actual criminal empire. But those fell away with feedback and rescoping, and all the while, how we approached choice also changed as well. There was this constant demand for bigger, broader, more complex, and it became really important that we found a way to adequately scope ourselves so that the project didn't completely run away from us. So we gave the story a named protagonist, someone that acted a certain way, spoke a certain way, had values and dreams. Making the character Gia was probably the biggest constraint we had in making the game, and based on how big the scope creeped, it was probably what kept us sane. As the writing team grew beyond me, I needed to establish a style that the team could pick up and carry that wasn't just write like Tyler. To do this, we looked towards an established genre of style, noir novels of the 30s, 40s, and 50s. But this tone and vibe wasn't just a way we approached voice, but also choice. In a lot of these novels, you have a haggard hero that can make mistakes, but what makes those stories so exciting was that even after a mistake or an obstacle, the hero is able to still be themselves and follow that new plotline into something interesting. And since we wanted to lean into the fantasy of a smuggler noir archetype, we took that idea and applied it to game choice. If the player makes a poor choice or fails a roll, that shouldn't be a boring path. That should be an exciting new avenue with material to explore, just like in those old novels. But even with this style and approach to creating choices, that didn't answer the technical questions of where and what those choices look like. So we created guidelines on how often choices should appear, what type of content should be revealed at those choice hubs, what are the consequences that we can pull from to make sure those choices aren't purely narrative driven. We had a particularly fun time creating death traps throughout the story. After writing much of the game, we went back through the entire plot and found points where we felt, oh, you could die here if you didn't have plot armor. We then added in poor choices in those moments where if you're not paying attention, you'll die, which can cause quite the stressor when playing the permadeath mode. But I can provide the small comfort that deaths don't come from dice rolls, only repeated poor choices. Or in other words, did you make a choice that Gia really wouldn't have done? As we transition into the end of the project and reflect on what we created, there are a few final thoughts about lessons that we learned. The first is about the value of choice. Where it might seem easy to say, people want choice, the reality is that people want consequence. But if you dig deeper still, it's less about real consequence and more about blatantly obvious consequence. The obviousness of a consequence is so subjective that you can't really codify it, however. What you can do is create rules or signposts that help point to consequence. So even if the consequence isn't obvious, the player sees that something is a consequence. That all being said, and perhaps to give the least technical take of all, at the end of the day, it's really about feel. You can set the rules, signpost them, establish expectations as well as you possibly can. When it's all said and done, the story has to feel good. And that is created by more than just proper rules. It's made with a passionate team of writers, artists, audio engineers, developers, and designers that try and, if they're lucky, find some sort of special sauce that makes everything just click in a way that isn't really explainable.